know, there really isn't a way around saying it. Modern Warfare 3 will be the biggest game of 2011 sales-wise. It's not a bloated statement. It will be the biggest release this year. However, I've never been the type of person who believes that popularity gives someone a pass from criticism. As a critic, everyone gets a fair shot with me. The thing is, there's a positive and negative to that. You got just as much of a chance of hearing me glow about your product as you do hearing me bag it out. With that said, if you want to know exactly how good Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 is, you're about to find out.
Roger, Metal 01. Missile strikes confirmed on multiple Russian hard targets in your AO. All primary threats neutralized. Good work, team. That's one for the books.
To start, I wish I could give you a plot summary of Modern Warfare 3. I can't. Not because it's good, because this game's story is terrible. The plot for this game is the perfect example of what you get when a writing staff for a development company has written itself into a hole. In fact, I can destroy the plot of Modern Warfare 3 with one question. How did Russia invade the United States and the situation not end with mutually assured destruction? Anyone who knows anything about global politics can tell you that the basic premise of this story is impossible, and from there, it just gets worse. And here's what the reaction from the developers was when it came to being in this hole. Did they do anything special with it? Did they bring forward interesting characters that make us care about this wacky world? Did they flesh out motivation, or anything along those lines? Do we get to know anyone? No. Everyone that you control in this game is a voiceless fool who is nothing more than a camera and a gun. When characters die off, you feel nothing. What's even worse is that the game tries to portray that death as something meaningful, when it isn't. How am I supposed to care when I know nothing? Aside from simply trying to blow things up or kill things to try to dig itself out of a hole, another thing Modern Warfare 3 tries to do is offend the person watching it, trying to get that wow factor. Essentially, seeing New York in flames is supposed to do that for you. Or if you're French, the Eiffel Tower falling over is supposed to do that for you. And I'm about to spoil something for you, and I'm breaking my own rule here, so if you don't want to hear it, fast forward about 45 seconds. The thing is that you see civilians shot and executed in this, but it gets a bit worse than that. During one point of the game, you see a child killed. A little girl, to be specific. On one hand, it's downright tasteless. On the other hand, it's disgusting that this was done simply for shock value, as opposed to trying to drive home a point. In fact, what is the point here? What is the point of Modern Warfare 3's story? What is this story trying to tell me? Why are there so many moments where the developers are trying their hardest to offend me? Is there a reason we're trying to make the video game equivalent of a Marilyn Manson live performance? Do the developers honestly think that they're trying to make a point about war in this series? If they are, they're being pretentious. There is no point about war here, and if you're trying to tell me that war is bad, you're about 2 presidential terms too late to the party.
Copy that, 2-3.
Presentation-wise, I can't really say that there's much to talk about from a visual standpoint. The game doesn't look bad, but it doesn't really look as good as its predecessor, Black Ops. Many of the environments you find yourself in are wrecked cities in the midst of becoming urban war zones. There's quite a few grays and gunmetals, and a couple of levels in the snow, so you're not getting a lot of color variance. The only thing that I can remark on as a positive is that the gun details are very true to life, and the explosions look good. Not quite on the level of something like Crysis 2, but what is? Sound design really isn't anything to write home about either. The soundtrack is both by the numbers and inferior to Modern Warfare 2's. It is essentially music that proverbially blends into the furniture. The voice acting is decent as well, but nothing's going to stand out. Evidently, and I didn't know this, Timothy Oliphant and William Fichtner were voice actors within the game. I didn't even know they were there. In a way, it almost feels like a waste of talent, really. You've got seasoned voice actors inside the game, but you're not doing anything worthwhile with them. You've got the star of Justified in your game, and you're not pushing him into the forefront. It's confusing, to say the least. Still, voice actors don't flub their lines, and they don't become overly hammy, so it's a competent performance. It's just nothing to write home about.
UAV is already in your airspace. Friendly Predator missile inbound.
Finally, we come to the gameplay, and there's quite a bit to talk about here. Core mechanics of shooting and such are still the same. But one thing that's interesting that they've now put in is a neat little inclusion that allows you to switch from medium to long range by having 2 sights on your gun at the same time, giving one weapon quite a bit more versatility as opposed to hunting around for a weapon with an ACOG scope or something like that. Everybody watching this probably wants to hear about the multiplayer, so let me first tell you that it is a mixed bag. The one major change to some modes is that they don't give credit for kills, but rather for teamwork as a whole. You get points for everything essentially, and not one thing really has more points than the other. The problem is that this one change doesn't really affect the way the game is played. Gameplay still feels like a focus on the highest death count, mostly due to the fact that each weapon has a specific experience to it, as opposed to Black Ops' version where you simply just bought your upgrades with your pooled money. To the credit of the developers, though, some of the new game modes are very good. Specifically, Kill Confirmed is an interesting take on the normal deathmatch formula, and also it allows for new strategies to be formed within teams. Another thing to mention, though, is that the multiplayer simply isn't working very well. The biggest flaw with Call of Duty's multiplayer has been the fact that the console versions don't have dedicated servers. The reason that this is such a huge problem is that the games no longer become a battle of one player's skills against another's. It's a battle of connections, and not everyone can afford fiber optics. On top of that, starting weaponry is downright weak in comparison to the later unlocks. In a game where matchmaking is downright non-existent, and I literally mean this, it's similar to putting Uriah Faber in an octagon and expecting him to beat up Brock Lesnar. It's just not going to happen. What isn't a waste of time is the Spec Ops mode, though. It was a standout feature of Modern Warfare 2, and it's the one part of the game that is easily the most exhilarating. The old co-op mission format is still there, with several interesting ways to have you and a partner accomplish certain objectives, and there is always new ways to look at it, and there's always something new included in that specific mission that makes you think a different way. What's new is the survival mode, which is a 2-man Modern Warfare version of Horde. Not to say that it's ripping it off, but it is very similar. What makes this one different is the pace is ramped up. Everything is at breakneck speed, and the game constantly throws new threats at the player to make them reevaluate what weapons they need to buy, where they need to be placing their traps, and where they need to stand their ground. Not to mention a lot of the unlocks are just awesome to use. You get a lot of the multiplayer stand-ins like the turrets and such, but another interesting thing is that you can actually get reinforcements from Delta, and even Riot Shield reinforcements. It's just unfortunate that it's not a 4-player mode, but then again, the maps are designed well enough that only having 2 players isn't a detriment. To conclude, I feel like I'm in a rough position here as a critic. Many people out there don't care about the single player, but I can't just ignore how bad it is. On top of that, a lot of people want to know about the multiplayer, and I can't just overlook the flaws and give you good news when there is no good news to be given. It'd be like reviewing half of a movie, or only listening to the singles on a CD and judging it by those tracks alone. The single player is a mess. The multiplayer has potential, but is bogged down with connection issues and faulty design ideas. The Spec Ops is great though. So 1/3 of the game stinks, 1/3 of the game has potential, but isn't very good right now, and the final third is very good. Ultimately, I think that it comes to average. I give Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 a 5 out of 10, and say that this is a game that only fans should buy. For the full write-up, head to blisteredthumbs.net.